Blind Faith Live. Real people, real miracles.
I had a vision of what I'm doing today.
Dr. Issam Nemeh, the physician of unshakable faith.
It was about 14 years old. And it was like a puzzle in my mind.
Dr. Issam Nemeh prays, things happen. How can we make our prayers more powerful? My name is Philip Keller, also known in radio circles as Trapper Jack, and welcome to Blind Faith Live. Real people, real miracles. Today, the questions will be asked by somebody I used to know.
When Phil says you don't have an ego, I have to ask, you've put yourself in a position where it might be very lonely.
Ed Esposito, longtime newsman, longtime friend of mine. We worked together for a handful of years in the 90s. Very bright, very well read, very well respected. Ed Esposito is the radio news god of Akron, Ohio, near Cleveland. He also is very well respected around the country. He is a big kahuna with an organization called the Radio and Television News Directors Association. And through that, he knows the movers and shakers. He knows those that you have seen and heard in media, and those behind the scenes, the news directors, the producers, and things like that. And so this always seemed like a great news story to me, just sitting there. And every now and then someone will grab the story and run with it. And I thought Ed might be one of those people. So I got a little surprise here recently. Ed and I were out to lunch. Why? It's been a long time. Why do you want to talk to Dr. Nemeh and me and all that good stuff? What's the whys and wherefores at this point for Ed Esposito?
I just woke up in the morning and I said, I haven't seen those guys for a while. I've been thinking about it for a long time. I just didn't have the spirit strike me, for lack of a better term. And
Spirit's good. Spirit has its own time.
When you start thinking about what's the science of how this works, then I think most people start thinking, okay, so this could be something we can replicate, right, without the original source.
Right.
We can make cortisone with serum from monkey pituitary glands. Or we could figure out a way to do it synthetically and have modern-day cortisone versus naturally conceived cortisone, so we don't have to kill as many monkeys. Welcome to Spectrum. I'm Ed Esposito, and on this week's program, talking about matters of medicine and faith and healing. And
away we go with Ed Esposito, and we delve, of course, initially into the background of Dr. Issam Nemeh.
I had a vision of what I'm doing today. It was about 14 years old. And it was like a puzzle in my mind. After high school, I enrolled in electronic engineering first. Then I decided to go for medicine, to medical school. But this kept on being on my mind nonstop. The vision was pretty powerful. And since the early years in medical school, I've had that interest, about some alternative things. And I tested many things along the way. Not to mention, of course, the faith. And I always did have since my childhood.
I read and I see that you have prayed 500,000 people. You've prayed over 500,000 people. 500,000 was the latest number, and that may have changed now. When you first started hearing this vision, was it telling you were going in the wrong direction with medicine, or was it telling you that this needed to be a part of the medicine part of Issam Nemeh?
No, I knew it was right from there. There was a lot of science involved, and I don't regard it as a separate part. I regard it as part of the medicine that we practice today.
Now, I would say most critics would say, how can faith coexist with science?
There's an increasing interest. Actually, in Harvard, I'm working right now with Dr. Rediger, who is associated with another professor. There is an increasing interest. Because they have been observing many things happening, in particular when it comes to the placebo effect.
The placebo effect is when, during drug trials, when someone is giving a drug they're testing versus a drug that may be inert or not have that. And so they would look and see, okay, do patients respond enough?
Yes.
And the placebo effect should have no effect whatsoever on the patient, but it does sometimes.
It's a known fact, has been a known fact. But for about 7-8 years, the placebo effect has been gaining more effectiveness. In a sense, some even studies were showing even 100% the placebo to be 100% stronger than the medications. And the conclusion there is that there must be something that is affecting the human consciousness in general. Some kind of a transformation is happening. So they are looking into why is that happening. And they start looking for cases of spontaneous recovery, and my name came up.
Mm-hmm. Was that you must have been on their radar on occasion for your healings, for your research, for your approaches to healings in different form or fashion. So it would seem only natural they would come to you and say, how are you doing this?
Yes, and that's what happened, actually. And I found out that they were sending patients, actually, to me. I didn't know. And the patients they sent recovered.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they decided just to have a closer approach,
I do want to plumb that a little bit deeper, but I also want to turn to Phil a little bit. And full disclosure, Phil and I have been friends for a long time. We worked together in Cleveland radio. He was the best man at my wedding. My wife still remembers his wedding toast that night, which
you want to recreate that moment?
No,
yeah.
That's quite all right. You have apologized for it, but she still remembers it. That's the important part.
I have no idea who you are.
So, but you came to this place through a radio career that took you from growing up in California to the West Coast through Pittsburgh, where you met your wife Beth, and eventually to Cleveland. Had a long, successful career in radio. Now you're doing something different. You're working with Dr. Nemeh. You're helping tell the story of his patients and his healings and what he does. What got you to that place?
I found I couldn't not tell these stories because I'm legally blind with retinitis pigmentosa. Two of my siblings have the same thing. One totally blind. Mine is just keeps degenerating over time. And then so when we had a sitter come over, a nanny. If they're older than you, they're a nanny. So a nanny came over and she had medical issues. She and her husband both had heart attacks. And nurses at the Cleveland Clinic said, there's this doctor, and all we know is that people get off their meds quicker. They're having, talking about miracle things happening. And so she went to see Dr. Nemeh. And then she came over one night and she said, I just had this amazing supernatural experience. I was in his office. He's not touching my body. I'm not doing it. And all of a sudden my body starts moving. My legs are doing this and that, and they're gyrating. And she asked the normal question, why is this happening? And Dr. Nemeh said it's the Holy Spirit. So sure enough, she gets off her meds and she gets better and all that kind of stuff. So me, as she comes over and tells me the story, the blind guy, and a rather crass, kind of just barely there Christian, says, well, I want to go see the show. I just want to go see the show. What will happen when I'm in there? And when I went over the very first time I came in, coming out was another patient by the name of Liz Simmons. And Liz had MS for 20 years to the point where she was in a scooter, going blind with optic neuritis. She used to teach piano and she couldn't anymore because her hands were like boards or fists or whatever it had become with her hands. And she says, it's all reversed. I'm teaching piano again. I'm out of the scooter. Optic neuritis has been reversed, which is impossible. So that got my attention. And then as I started seeing the doctor, I kept meeting more and more people who were having the impossible happen. And every now and then they would allow me into their treatments and I would watch, the healings actually happen. And then when the healing services started, then it just multiplied and multiplied. So I was one of those guys who just, why? Why is this happening? What's so special about this guy? And what I found was that, and he'll say he's not special and all those things, and it's all God and not him. And all that is true. And we all have the same access, but we all have, as I've learned, different levels of surrender. The guy has no ego, and ego gets in the way of healing. Ego gets in the way of everything when you want to connect with God. And he just has this love about him and forgives everybody to the degree that if somebody does him wrong, he figures he himself, Dr. Nemeh, must have done something wrong to bring that about, that they would have done what they just did to him. He puts it on himself. That's his level of forgiveness. And his level of acceptance of everything in his life is a blessing. All these things that Christ taught, he truly lives in his life. It's not lip service. And because of that, when he prays, God takes note, and the prayers are more powerful than maybe mine or yours.
This is Spectrum. I'm Ed Esposito. Our guests are Dr. Issam Nemeh and Philip Keller, blindfaithlive.com. He's a .com kind of guy. Dr. Nemeh, going back to you. And you sort of get, and I want to springboard over something that Phil said about this too, but you get these references from other physicians, in this case, Cleveland Clinic, where you work. Is it hard for physicians to say, I want someone to come see you? Because it seems to me that there's almost a culture within the medical profession or science that you don't talk about these sort of things. You look to answers to science rather than answers of spirituality.
Yes, over the years I haven't had many referrals. And as a physician, I understand that position. The way we are educated puts you in a place where those things become hard to accept. Those things are not talked about usually. Mm-hmm. Not only this, all sorts of alternatives prove themselves over the years not to be that kind of effective. So the success rate is so low. So there are a couple of things that prevent them from referring or telling patients, even though I've had some, referrals that came through physicians that actually I treated and made a recovery.
When Phil says you don't have an ego, I have to ask, you've put yourself in a position where it might be very lonely as a medical practitioner, where other doctors may be afraid to talk to you about this, or you may be charting a course or seeing and hearing a vision that others don't. Is it that way for you?
I wouldn't say lonely. I'm used to that part. I think the way I went through my life prepared me very well for that kind of a position. I've lived all my life almost by myself. Mm-hmm. And it was God's hand in it. There's no question in my mind about that. When it comes to physicians accepting, that type of a practice, it's very hard because so far over the years there hasn't been any really purely scientific study that was done about the subject that without any doubt could present the evidence of the effectiveness of spirituality to begin with, mm-hmm. and of even the type of medicine I'm practicing today.
Now, why do you think that is? Is that just because the preconceived notions in the culture is that strong? It would seem to me that doctors would leap at a chance at something which might work, and they'd want to study it to see what its efficacy was.
You would logically would think that way, but that's not the case. You see, it's very hard to think outside of the box, mm-hmm. because here in our education we are told what to know, and there are certain things that we abide by. So if something comes from outside of that box, it becomes very hard for us to accept. Not only this, the scientific study or studies they haven't been really done. And that's where I play a role, mm-hmm. to tell you the truth, because many things are manifesting, manifesting in such a way it made it possible for us to delve into that type of research. And I have done one in particular with a NASA scientist from Langley. And the paper is pretty impressive. Mm-hmm. That proves the point that definitely there are things that happen, some physical events that happen that we could register, and we can repeatedly show, pointing towards a certain energy field that translates from, I would say, quantum field, mm-hmm. Down to matter.
When you do this, when you pray over someone, and your record is impressive, you have very many stories which are compelling, which are miracles. by any definition. What happens to you when you do that? How does that work for you? Do you pray? Do you pray specifically to remove this ailment? Do you pray that people find peace, that they find healing?
Yes, there are a couple of things that play a role. The state of mind is extremely important. There is a higher reality that was revealed to the early ones, and we forgot about. Over the centuries, we've lost that type of knowledge. And what I'm talking about is the mind itself, the human mind, the connectedness that we could have, because God is a unity. And that unity is showing itself in everything that we are surrounded by. Whether to think about God as a Trinity for us as Christians, or to think about anything that is in existence. Everything has the same reflection of that God, because everything has a consciousness behind it. You look at certain examples, like even on the microscopic level, that show us that there is a consciousness behind the physical manifestation. So everything is pointing towards unity. So here, as a consciousness, as a human being, if I place myself within the same type of a state of mind that allows me to have the connection to that universal consciousness, which is God, then higher laws apply then. So here, I have to make sure that in my mind, I'm placing myself in such a place to work for the well-being of everything that I'm surrounded by.
Okay.
And that opens the door for an incredible thing. As a matter of fact, to tell you the truth, the science today is capable of understanding that type of thinking, because here the quantum field itself, in its definition, it's an intelligent field that has all the possibilities and probabilities of everything that is in existence, ever present. And that's the mind of God. And we know that everything is energy. Matter as such is not matter. But everything does respond to then that information that is already coded, that is already in the mind of God. You see, and we abide by the same type of principle. Here, our mind is infinite in nature too. And the possibilities when it comes to anything that we could imagine is there, and it's infinite in nature. So when I'm connected, then the same laws do apply. So the secret is in the connectedness. The secret is in that love that we have for everything that we are surrounded by. Then physical laws do manifest themselves, and we can actually present the evidence repeatedly. I'm capable of doing that.
Let's talk about this. Talking with Dr. Issam Nemeh and Phil Keller. Just talk a little bit about some of the cases that stick out in your minds. And we've got 5 minutes, so I don't want to make you rush too much, but the time is also a harsh mistress. I'm struck by recent cases you've posted of people who have regenerated, lost, or unworking limbs. I'm struck by people who've had genetic disorders from childhood that would kill them, that have suddenly cleared. People who've had debilitating diseases such as MS. Talk a little bit about those cases in particular.
Yes.
And how that energy that comes through you, what you say is the connection with the mind of God, actually manifests itself.
Yes. Now, things that do present themselves as a healing have no limitations. What I mean by that, we get people with end-stage lung disease, for example, whether COPD or even interstitial pulmonary fibrosis, and you see the whole lung going back to its normal. People with kidney failures and stuff like that. Even cases with the eyes. where the retina does regenerate itself. They go back to normal vision. So there are no limitations whatsoever when it comes to the healings that we could experience. And that's the concept here. Everything, and it trickles down really to that state of mind. So when we are connected, this world is defective. God is perfect. There is some disharmony in here as a result of the fall, actually, because the natural law is defective. Mm-hmm. Everything abides by the laws of entropy. But when it comes to God, there is no entropy whatsoever. So here, then the mind translates itself. Any disorder could be repaired, could be corrected. So I see no limitations whatsoever.
Is this why this works for people who may not share your faith? Because I know you do healings for people who walk through the door who may be of a different faith or no faith whatsoever.
Yes, it's not a matter of faith. It's because how many people they have the faith and yet they have hatefulness within their hearts, mm-hmm. and discrimination, and you name it. The whole thing is about our true love. The whole thing is about how do we place ourselves in this life. Are we putting ourselves in such a way to act for the well-being of the whole earth, or not? And that's what makes the whole difference. You could be an atheist. You could be of any faith. It does not matter. What matters is the love that you could have, the true love that you have in your heart.
Phil, I want to throw to you and the reaction of stories that you've seen. You've talked a little bit about this, but you have gotten very deep into telling these stories. Not just someone who goes and experiences this yourself, maybe once or twice, but you've almost become a chronicler of this.
Yeah, and that's been the beauty of 120 straight weeks we've been doing Blind Faith Live. 120 straight weeks, so there's probably 150 plus miracle stories in all of that. And each one is so special, and each one is its own journey. And Dr. Nemeh talks about the love and you see the love in these people that get the miracles, or an awakening that creates a greater faith in them. There are certain ones that are just so visible. We had a woman up in Michigan, Ann Henning, who literally was bent over at a 90-degree angle. She had broken her back, weird freak thing, about 12 or 14 years before, and had surgeries, and her son-in-law is a radiologist, and all these things, and every medical thing done to her brain, to her back. And to see with one prayer, her come straight up, and to her to look at her husband. And she said, Vic, my husband, she says, I've never seen him cry in our 50 years of marriage. He was crying. And then she said, Vic, we get to be belly to belly. And you see that daily, literally daily, with Dr. Nemeh.
How does this work? Do people reach out to you through doctors? I mean, I must imagine, and Kathy Nemeh, your wife, Issam, is sitting in the room. So I have to imagine the phone constantly rings off the hook. You constantly get email requests. People want you around the country, around the world. You only have 24 hours in a day.
Yes, and basically the referrals come through other patients, through people that experience the healing. I don't get many referrals from physicians or any health professionals.
Regardless of health professionals that have seen this work for their patients.
Regardless of that.
Do they just say to themselves, wow, that was interesting, and let's move on, and I'm going to forget all about this?
Some did refer, but they've encountered difficulties. And when I have any healthcare professional that comes to me, the first thing that I tell them, please don't talk about it. Because I get concerned about their
reputation, because they would dare to talk to you about this.
Exactly. But definitely is based upon the recoveries themselves, and people do tell each other. And my patients actually mainly come through other patients. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, which is very important. If we cannot reach the mind to affect it, I can reach the mind through the body. And this is extremely important, and important in a sense, even for the future research I'll be involved with. you definitely can reach the mind through the body. So here, if somebody comes in and is negative, my connectedness could allow them to experience bodily things that they didn't imagine before. And this always opens their mind and leads them to asking questions.
Have you ever met anyone who's truly closed that you can't get to?
Yes, some did.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, some did. Or some, at the moment they accepted, but afterwards their mind went back to having a question. Like, those things happened, maybe just spontaneously they happened. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but those cases are very rare because the healings are so tremendous. And
I'm reminded somewhat of Einstein's favorite quote about God doesn't play dice with the universe. So it's, to think that these things are spontaneous or just happen is kind of hard to think of sometimes.
Yeah.
But obviously blindfaithlive.com is a place to go to see stories, to hear stories, and also to ask questions. You all answer those questions that come your way.
That's a cool part of this too, is that, people have questions. We include that in the podcast as well, some Q&A times, emails and stuff like that. So we try to touch on all of this, because all of this, if you've never dealt with this before, it's sci-fi land. It's crazy. This is crazy. Ed, this is crazy. We all recognize this is nuts, because we all grew up with that funny television station that had that guy talking about healing and all that kind of stuff. And we all went,
Hey, this is Aaron down in Akron, brother. We know exactly where that comes from.
Exactly. And it all looked crazy time. And then and I think what we were recognizing without realizing it was we weren't seeing God so much as we were seeing ego, with all due respect. And so when you take a step back and you actually see God doing some work here through the most humble of humbles, then you go, this is real. Anybody who looks at this for 5 minutes knows it's real. Anybody. And that's the beauty.
Well, I could also testify, Dr. Nemeh, you don't fly in a 747 with all the bells and whistles of some of the folks that do that. Blindfaithlive.com. Also, you have a podcast page as well, strictly with podcasts that they can subscribe to on iTunes, or folks can do that. Can
and also, and the doctor has pathtofaith.com. Mm-hmm. They can find out a lot there, pathtofaith.com.
Okay. Dr. Nemeh, Phil Keller, thanks for being with us this morning. This has been Spectrum. I'm Ed Esposito. Make it a great day.
Hey, God bless.
Thank you, Dr. Issam Nemeh, the physician of unshakable faith, here on Blind Faith Live. Real people, real miracles. Complete new episodes every Tuesday. See you then. I'm Philip Keller.